Hi, and welcome back to another video. So last time we left off finishing up the Colosseum pictures. Without further ado, let's jump into it and edit some of these together. With this picture, I do like this picture, and as we can see, the focusing system did a good job and it captured focus. However, the problem here is that there's a car in this frame and there's too much of a grass. So if I were to do a crop on this, I could do a crop, but then I would be losing way too much detail trying to crop this out as such. Now, out of these three pictures, these are all shot nearly the same. This one is shot at an f10 and this one is shot at a f7.1. So this one is a little bit more zoomed in slightly compared to these two. Now, between these two pictures, we can see that they're nearly identical. So which one do you pick? Well, in this situation, you have to pick the one with the more details and the sharper image by itself, and then edit it further. Now, between these two, deciding which one to pick is a little difficult. Traditionally, if you have the exact same picture, you would go after the one that is brighter lit, so then you can adjust the details of it, but then the actual picture details is there from it being perfectly lit, and you don't have to bring up the exposure and try to recover details. So traditionally you would say this picture, but then looking at these two together, I can actually see that this picture, the darker one, is that it's a little bit sharper when it comes to these figurines here and the edges of the stones. So let's explore this picture a little bit. And the good thing about this picture is that there's no car on the main road. And we can crop out right up until the start of the road going into there. So we're just going to crop right above this gentleman's head. And then we're going to crop it in slightly so we maintain some sort of uniformity. And then click enter. Now, we're faced with a problem. We have the arch here, center frame. However, there's way too much sky. Again, if there was some clouds here in the sky, it would have been nice. However, it was a perfectly clear day and we don't have any clouds. So what we're going to do is also crop in from the top. Now this is what we have. Obviously, this is almost half of what we had originally in terms of original picture resolution. So you don't want to do this, and you have to try to avoid it as much as possible. Now, if there was some sort of way to take this picture, I would have, but I think this is nearing the max zoom of the Fuji that I was using. So let's start editing this. Here, what we want to do is bring out some details in the actual arch. So we're gonna slightly boost up the texture and the clarity, just ever so slightly, and then boost up the contrast too. And then what I'm actually going to do is, we don't want to boost up the exposure because it will boost the entire exposure of the image. We're going to boost up highlights so the arch is a little bit more visible. And then for shadows, we can see the shadows being the trees and the road and the people in the cars here. We're actually going to bring it down so there's less attention on those subjects, and the main attention is given to the arch, which is what the intended picture is. Now with whites, if we boost it up all the way, we can see that the whites in this image are the sky and the arch, which is basically where the highlights are. Now we boosted the highlights already, and this is giving us enough details, so we'll leave it at that. Now in terms of the blacks are the shadows. So again, we want to slightly decrease it, so then the arch will be more naturally lit and our attention will be diverted to it more naturally compared to being distracted by the rest of the stuff going on here. Now, if there was a way that I could get rid of this without spending too much time on it, the security booth, I would, and the seagulls as well. So then it would just be dark trees on either side and then a road and going into the arch. That would be the ideal scenario. However, in this case, this is what we have and this is what we're going to work with. Now, boosting the individual saturation of the colors, I'm going to boost up green a little bit and boost up orange. So then we have a little bit more color in this picture. So then also divides from the uniform blue background. Now, if we bring down blue all the way, doesn't look good. If we boost it all the way, doesn't look good either. So we're not going to touch blue and we're just going to leave it as it was taken. And that's this picture done. Let's do it before and after. So we didn't do much in terms of specifics. We just did a little bit of color correction to something that is more inviting and more pleasing to look at. Now, let's go to this. This picture of the arch, I want to crop it in so that we get rid of the fence. And then the corner of the arch here is actually in the 1/3 frame. So then it's a little bit more pleasing to look at. If this picture were to be taken, let's say by yourself, you'd want to do it when there's no shadows, so then the arch would be all perfectly lit. Now here we're going to boost up the contrast, boost up clarity, boost up the texture, so then we can see a little bit more of the details in the work that is done on the stones. Now, in this situation, I actually want to boost up the shadows because the shadows are here and it's a little bit too dark. Here, what I want to do with the shadows is that if they were completely black, then the picture wouldn't be a good picture and it would be a little bit distracting. So I'm actually going to boost up the shadows and boost up the blacks. And then what it actually does is that it makes this top part of the frame a little bit more bright. So I'm going to bring down the exposure slightly. So this creates a more uniform picture where the details down here are just as well visible as the details up here. Now this picture was taken pretty wide at 25 millimeters, but then this is 25 on an APS-C, so this is actually closer to 38 millimeters on a full frame camera. Again, we're looking at 1/200 seconds and f7.1. This f7.1 allows us to capture details here and on the front of the arch, which is where the focusing was done. I think the focusing was done actually around this area, and also capture details of the statues in the top right corner, which is some distance away from here. If this was done at, let's say, f3.5, which is what this lens can do, the uniformity of the details wouldn't be present, and you would get sharpness here and a little bit of blurriness up here. Now, going into the specific colors, if I boost up green all the way, then it takes away from the subject, which is the arch. So I'm going to actually boost up the orange and boost up the yellow. So it creates more of an inviting look to it. And don't touch the greens and leave it be. Same with blue, don't touch it. So then we have the main focus being the arch. A little bit more on the Colosseum. This one, I was just testing things out. Wasn't necessarily a picture. Same with this. Again, if I want to go out and edit this, it will be too much of a crop. This is where having a full frame camera will do wonders, because you can crop as much as you want in post and not worry about losing detail. But let's say I do a crop like this here. And actually I'm cropping so I can get rid of this, the edge of the building down here. And then just to the top of the fences here. So we'll do this crop and then boost up the contrast. So then we have the dark alleyways creating a bit of mystery and of course this coincides with the history of the Colosseum being a place for warriors to go and fight. Now here we have an overexposure situation where this is too lit and it's actually blown out. So what we're going to do is bring down the highlights. Now, you see I have to bring down the highlights down to 0 or minus 100 to recover any sort of detail in this area. So what we're going to do is do a radial gradient. And we're going to create one from here in an oval shape that goes up. Then we're going to place it here, turn it slightly in this manner, extend it sideways, and place it here. What we're going to do is bring down the exposure, bring down the highlights as such. Now this way we're not touching the highlights of the entire picture, because if we touch the highlights of the entire picture, then we're also affecting these pillars here, which we don't want to do. We don't want to bring down the exposure here, and we want to maintain the details that are already present. What we want to do is just do it here, and this is the limits that we can go to, minus 75. If we go to more than minus 75, then what actually happens is that we're creating the line where the masking is applied. So if you look in the top right corner where the sky is, it's visible that something has been done here, and that's not something we want. We want the picture to be by itself and the viewer to think, oh wow, this picture was taken good without any further editing, but in reality this is what we're doing. Now we said minus 75 is the limit, so let's go to minus 75 and let's click enter, leave that and come back to here. Now we're going to bring down the overall highlights a little bit as well, so the sky is a little bit easier, and then shadows. Now if I recover the shadows all the way, then this is more lit, but then we recover details in the alleyways, which is again not something that we want. So what I'm actually going to do is go back into masking and then create a new mask, and then what I will do is do a linear gradient. Now we'll create it from this top right corner going down and into the middle. Now the reason for this is because I don't want these alleyways, these 3 alleyways here and these 2 to be affected, nor do I want the bottom ones here to be affected. So what I'm going to do here is recover the shadows, and what we actually have is the illusion that this frame is well lit, but in reality what's happening is that the sun is behind the Colosseum and it's hitting light towards this area. But what it actually seems like is that this picture is well lit, which we'll do a before and after of, and you will see. And again, we just want to bring up the yellow and the orange ever so slightly so it creates a more welcoming atmosphere. I'm actually going to decrease the blues, and I think that's good enough. Now so before and after. So what we did is recover details in this left corner here. We made the overall picture a little bit more uniformly lit by creating that gradient and not touching the shadows in the alleyways in this area. Perfect. Go to the next picture. Now this picture, what I was trying to go after is the backs of these statues looking over the Colosseum. However, we have this tree down here. So what I'm actually going to do is do a crop as such and put the statues in the 2/3. So this is in the 2/3 corner, and the statues end in the bottom 2/3. So we have a lot of sky and we also have the subject, which is the statue it's looking over. Now, we have a seagull and we have some trees to deal with. Now what I'm gonna do here is do a spot treatment. Zoom in so I can get all the details. Increase the size of this. So what I'm doing here is making a clone, and this will take approximately a minute and then some more afterwards. And what you're seeing here is a sped up version of it. And this is a tedious process. If you want good details, please take your time and be careful with it, because if you mess up the slightest bit, then you have to go from the beginning and do it again. Now we're just going to repeat this many more times and keep getting the clones from the right side over here. Now this is one of those situations where you want to do a fair bit of feathering so it blends in a little bit smoother, but obviously not too much where you start revealing the details of the object that you're trying to prevent us from seeing. Now what you can actually do is do a clone of a clone. And then here I would actually feather it a lot. We'll do a nice big feather as such. Now let's look at it overall. Major improvement. Now obviously I need to do this part again and do a couple of more clones of clones down here. But overall, this is the intended goal, and we're starting to get where we're going after. So let me just do this. This will be a very low feather. Is this too much detailed work, and am I over obsessing about this? To some degree, yes. But I also have a vision for this picture which requires this amount of work. This is good enough for what it is. I don't want to spend any more time. Remember that you have to find a good balancing act of how much time do you want to spend per picture to make it perfect, and how much time do you want to spend going through the pictures. So this is good enough. The way I imagine this is this will be phone wallpaper, so you can't even zoom in that far and see the details that much. If it's one of the wider angled pictures like this one, for example, I would spend the time to go in and edit all those fine details, because it would naturally be viewed on a larger screen. But for for the portrait style pictures, I'm not going to spend that much time going through it, simply because the viewing platform that will be viewed on will not allow the capability to see all these fine details. So let's just edit this picture a little bit more. As with all, boost up the contrast, bring down the height, actually keep the highlights the same. Shadows, I actually want to bring it down a little bit so it creates this more of a separation here. Texture and clarity, because we have nice and fine details here. And then boost up orange and yellow, and this is the overall result. Now something that I can actually do here is bring down the green so this tree is less visible to the eye and there's less attention going to it. That's for this picture. So we have another Colosseum picture. So what's going on is that the difference between these two pictures is that this is done at a 4.5 aperture and this is done at a 7.1. So this one naturally is a little bit sharper, so let's do the editing on this and then turn it so it's straight. So what I'm referencing for it being straight is this bottom pillar, because as the lens keeps capturing, The way lens captures is it captures the image, and then since it's a lens, it starts distorting it. Now, the bottom of the frame is closest to eye level, and therefore it will be closest to straight. Now, as we keep going up and up and up, there will be a slight curvature to things, and this is what we're seeing. If we draw a straight line from here all the way to up here, it won't be a straight line, and this will be set back further. But in reality, the building is straight. So what we have to do is reference this pillar on the edge here, and then this will be our straight frame, this one, and this one. As long as these are all in uniformity with one another, specifically this one, then we can assume that the picture is straight. Now, boost up the contrast, bring down the highlights, so we recover some of the details here, and then boost up the shadows so the entire picture will be more lit, and then also bring up the blacks so we can recover some detail, and then texture and clarity because we have some fine details in the stones and we want to see those. What does it look like in black and white? This is something I do with all my pictures just to see if black and white could work for it or not. Here, I don't think it's working, so let's get rid of it. And then boost up orange and yellow, so we have that more inviting hue to it. And then also slightly blue, because we want to show the clear blue sky. And that's done for this picture. Let's do it before and after. Obviously, we made it straight and change the colors a little bit. Now, similar picture, and we are going to do similar things to it. Boost up the contrast, bring up the exposure for the entire frame, but then bring down the highlights, boost the shadows slightly, and bring down the whites. Now, I don't like the fact that there's a seagull here, so let's get rid of Mr. Seagull. And then here I actually want to feather it a little bit more, so it will be unnoticeable. And there's a tiny speck, which is another seagull again. Let's get rid of him too. And boom. Clear blue sky everywhere. And let's make it a little bit warmer. Boost the saturation of orange and yellow. Perfect. And then slightly with blue as well. And that's it for this picture. Also, clarity and texture, so we have a little bit more detail in the stones. Let's keep going. Now, I really do like this picture, and this is why I took two. So in this first picture, we have this woman in her ponytail obstructing the frame. And the other thing is that we're actually cutting the bottom of the frame out. So in this next picture, I realized a mistake and I took it again. This time, waited for the woman to go away so her ponytail wasn't in it. And also, I want the curvature of the Colosseum to be perfectly visible from the bottom all the way to the top. Now, in a perfect ideal scenario, I would have taken it where the curvature would come from here and then also from up there, and then just crop it in. This line would originate from the corner, and then this line would also originate from the corner. But we don't have this in this scenario. I'm gonna try to see if I can do some kind of crop. So I could do something along these lines, but then what we have here is a picture that is way too long in height and way too narrow, and it's not a natural frame size. So cropping could work, but to an extent. Here I just want to get rid of the tree so it's less distracting, and we still want to originate from the bottom corner here. Now, if this bush wasn't here and the road was perfectly visible, that would be ideal, but there's nothing you can do in this scenario. I want to bring down the highlights so we recover detail here and the sky isn't too blown out, and then boost up the shadows, boost up the clarity and texture so we have more detail in the stones of the Colosseum. And then again, going up in saturation for yellow and orange, so it's a more inviting look. And then here I actually want to bring down the green saturation, so our focus is taken to the main subject, which is the Colosseum, and not to the trees or the road down here. And then also boost up blue a little bit so we have that separation between the foreground and the background. Now, this frame is not perfectly straight, so let's straighten this out as such. And that's it for this. Let's do a little bit more. This one is a repeat of the other pictures, nothing worth editing. Same with this. Now, this is a nice wide angle picture of the entire Colosseum where we capture the whole circle. This one, we can edit it, and I will edit this to be 16 by 9. And then what I will actually do is bring this in so that the Colosseum, the top of the Colosseum is at the 2/3 point, and then we're not capturing too much of the road down here. What we want to do is capture the full circle, so here all the way to here. Make sure it's perfectly centered. A little bit of the road is okay, it creates that separation between the old and the modern. And let's go through the procedure. Same thing, bring down the highlights, boost up the shadows, bring down the whites, and then clarity and texture, and more yellow and orange. And this is what we get. Now, in terms of greens, let's just see what difference it would make. Let's bring them down slightly so it's less distracting and we see the more of the Colosseum. And that's done with this one. More of the Colosseum pictures. Since we don't have a line originating from anywhere and ending anywhere, I'm actually going to crop this out so we see just the top of this here, and then it goes around. And this is fine. And that's this one done. See a before and after. A little bit brighter, sharper, and more and warmer of a picture. Now here we have a seagull drinking water from one of these continuous water fountains, which are situated around Rome. Now, deciding between which one I want to edit, I want to find one which the water fountain is sharp and so is the seagull. Now here we actually see that the focus is on this plane, so the seagull's legs and feathers, but not the eyes or the fountain. This one, the focus is the plane which is here and also the eyes. So this could be a good picture to play with. Let's see this one. This one, everything is in focus, relatively speaking, so this is a good one too. Let's check out the last picture. This one is also a good picture to play with. I think this is a better picture because the fountain is more straight on from the perspective of the camera, which I'm standing here, I'm more straight on looking towards the fountain. This would have been a good picture, but I am cutting out the top of the fountain and also looking at the back of the seagull, which isn't very appealing to look at. And then this one could work too. Let's see what it would happen if we started cropping it and straightening it out. This is what it would look like, but I don't like the fact that I'm coming at it from a side angle, because it's not clearly visible or distinguishable what the subject of the frame is. So let's go to this last picture and edit this one. What I want to do is bring this up a little bit so we have less of the ground. And obviously here we have the ground that is wet and the ground that is dry. I'm going to crop out the ground that is dry, so then we have less things that are distracting us and separating the picture. Now I'm going to put the line of the stones at the 2/3 point, and then the fountain right in the middle, with the seagull being in this 1/3 corner. And let's start editing this. So with this one, I want to boost up the exposure, boost up the contrast slightly, bring down the highlights so it's a little bit more uniform, and we gain back some of the texture and the cast iron here. Now here, I could boost this up so the picture is more uniformly lit, but I'm actually going to bring it down so there's a bit of a separation between the fountain and the shadow in the corner here. I'm going to bring down the whites so the back of the head is less overexposed. Boost up the texture and clarity so we have a little bit more detail in the seagull's feather and the breaks, and the eyes and the cast iron and the lettering down here. And then what I'm actually going to do in this scenario is, so I'm actually going to bring down yellow and boost up orange, and then keep red the same, bring back blue all the way, so this is all gray, and that's good enough. So that's all for now. This is all the Colosseum pictures. Next, we're going to be looking at the Trevelli fountain and all the pictures of the individual statues here and the actual fountain. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in and looking at these pictures. If you want to have access to these pictures to the full JPEG file, it would be on my Unsplash wallpapers and also on my website at farzadfelfelion.com. Feel free to look at them, download them, use them as your wallpaper, spread the word, and tune in for more episodes of me editing these pictures, because there's plenty more of these to come. Thank you and have a good day.